I am not a thrower of pizzas, but I'll give it a go. When you're dealing with pizza, it's pretty delicate and you're not looking for holes, so you don't want to like finger it up like that. You know what I mean? This is like, you don't want that. Hi, I'm Ham El-Waylly, chef, recipe developer, and today we're making fugazzeta. So fugazzeta is an Argentine pizza. You know how Pizza Hut had that stuffed crust pizza where the cheese was on the crust? They don't play around, so they took it to a whole other level, and the entire pizza is a stuffed crust. It's wild. So you cut into it and it's insane amounts of cheese just stretching out. So if you're looking for like a Goofy movie level cheese pull, you want a fugazzeta. Fugazzetas hold like a very special place in my heart. We didn't really vacation a lot with my dad, and whenever we traveled with my dad, it would be on a combo business trip. He had business in Argentina. I always went for a fugazzeta as soon as we got there for lunch. That's what I demanded. Every single time we were there, I wouldn't be able to leave without it. The main thing that sticks in my mind is the ratio of onions to everything else, and just how much cheese is in the actual fugazzeta. Like, you look at it and you think that there's too much cheese, but then you take a bite and you're like, oh, it's surprisingly well balanced. All right, so the first thing you're gonna need to make is your fugazzeta dough, because that needs to proof. This is a pretty high hydration dough. It's a little harder to handle, but the payoff you get from the improved texture is so worth it. So I highly recommend that you use a stand mixer to mix this dough. It takes quite a long time to develop the proper gluten. So here I've got my bread flour. I'm gonna add that to the bowl. Kosher salt, yeast. I like instant. You don't need to dissolve it in water. You don't need to do anything. You just throw it into your dry and mix everything else in, and it'll proof on its own. It's a lot easier to work with, and it lasts forever in your freezer. Before I add any of my wet, I wanna give this a little stir just to make sure everything's at least a little bit incorporated. All right, so it's been about a minute. I'm gonna take the top, and then with my spatula, I'm just gonna give that one more toss just to make sure everything's as evenly dispersed as possible. All right, now I'm gonna add my olive oil and my water. So when I talk about hydration, I'm talking about how much water or liquid you're adding to your dough, just to help incorporate the water into the flour, and then we're gonna give it a mix. So once it's all in there and moistened, you wanna just let it knead, let it go, don't mess with it too much. And every once in a while, you wanna stop the machine and then scrape everything down. You wanna make sure that everything is getting kneaded equally, so you don't end up with parts that are just stuck to the sides and get crusty and dried up. So scrape it down and then just keep going. You wanna keep kneading this dough until it passes the window pane test. So what that means is that you're gonna take a lump of dough in between your fingers, and then you're gonna stretch it out, and then it shouldn't tear like that. It should be able to stretch out into a very thin film that you can actually see through. So once you can do that, that's an indication that you have enough gluten developed and you're ready to ball it up and then let it proof. This is very far away from that stage, so I'm gonna let that go for quite a bit longer. So after my dough is properly kneaded, I'm gonna ball it up, roll it in some olive oil, wrap it in plastic wrap, and then let it proof until it's doubled in size. It should take between an hour and a half to 2 hours, or you can even put it in your fridge and let it go overnight. That's like for maximum flavor. That's usually what I do at home. So my dough has been proofed, and it's doubled in size, and you can see that when you poke into it, it feels really poofy and soft, and the indentation that you leave with your finger is still there. And I'm handling it pretty gently. I don't want to knock all of the air bubbles out right now. So I'm gonna divide this in half. You can just eyeball it. Gonna set one side aside. If your dough feels really sticky and you find it really hard to manage, or it keeps sticking to your hand, don't use flour. Instead, I like to just rub a little olive oil on my hands and on the surface I'm working with, and that'll help it not stick to your hands. Adding flour at this point will mess up the hydration, so you don't want to throw that off after all the work you've put in. So I'm just slowly stretching out the dough with my hand. I'm not using a rolling pin. The rolling pin is the enemy of a good pizza dough because you want like some nice bubblage and some nice trapped gas. That's what helps everything get really crisp and chewy and fun to eat. And if you just get in there like a savage with a rolling pin, you're just gonna knock all that air out and you're gonna end up with a sad cracker instead of a happy pizza. So I'm looking to cover the bottom of my cast iron pan with some pizza dough. And that's gonna be my lower crust, to which I add my copious amounts of cheese.
Can you do a pizza throw on this one?
A pizza throw. I'm been challenged to do a pizza throw. I am not a thrower of pizzas, but I'll give it a go. All right, so we're gonna toss. That didn't work out that well. Let's go again. All right, it didn't fall on my face, so I'll take that. And let's, I think we're pretty close there. So I'm gonna stop here. I'm going to oil the bottom of my cast iron pan. You wanna use a seasoned cast iron here. The reason I like cast iron is it really traps the heat and it gives you a really crispy crust on the outside, which is fantastic for something like this, because we're all talking about textures here. You get stretchy cheese, you get crispy onion, you get really crispy pizza dough, you get a little chew. Like you get it, you have it all. And that's perfect. Covers the bottom of the pan. I'm just gonna flatten it out, make sure it's even. So I'm just going around, I'm gonna push it a little bit against the edge of the pan. You don't need to be too precise here, like don't worry about evenness, don't worry about any of that, because it's cooking for so long that it is gonna be cooked through. You just wanna make sure that the bottom of your cast iron is fully covered in dough, and that the dough goes to the edge of the pan. It'll just make the process of putting the top layer so much easier. So I'm using a 10-inch skillet here, just because I find that that's the proper ratio of cheese to dough to me. You can increase the amount of dough that you make, like double the recipe, and you can make larger ones, you can make multiple smaller ones, you can play around with it. But for this amount of dough, I find like a 10-inch cast iron is the perfect size. All right, so we got our dough, and now we cheese. So we're shingling the provolone, and I'm pressing it down, and I'm leaving a little half-inch border all around so that when I put my top crust on, I have something to crimp. You can find different toppings on other stuffed pizzas, but as far as a fugazzeta is concerned, this is the classic fugazzeta. And now we mutz. You know, I haven't made this in a while. I made it a bunch when I was developing it because I convinced myself I needed to make it a few more times until it was right, but really I just wanted to eat more. In my mind, it's like a crazy mountain of cheese, but looking at it now, it's fine. It's not obscene. So I'm gonna do the same thing with my top, just stretch it out. And then I wanna make it a little larger than the bottom so I can kind of crimp the edges together and seal it up. But before I forget, I'm gonna put this down and I'm gonna season up my cheese. So I'm adding a little chili flake. I'm adding some oregano and a little hit of salt. I find low moisture mozzarella always needs a hit of salt. It's not as people always tell you, oh, cheese is so salty, it's cheese, but there's a difference between Parmesan and mozzarella. Mozzarella needs a little help. Don't be scared to put a little salt on your mozzarella just because it's cheese. We're back to stretching our dough. Drape that on top. Wow, we did it. Look at that. And so now I wanna make sure that the edges are tight because you don't want any cheese spillage here. So I'm bringing the two edges together and I'm just sealing it shut with my finger. And I'm doing that all the way around. Ooh, look at that. That means we did a good job stretching out our dough. If you still have bubbles of air like that, now that we're all sealed, I'm gonna give it a light press to kind of evenly distribute the cheese, level out the dough. Now that my fugazzeta is formed, I'm gonna cover it up with a kitchen towel, and then we're gonna set it aside in a warm place to proof again, but for just 30 minutes. You're looking for it to get just a little bit of poof before we bake it. So while our fugazzeta proofs, we're going to slice our onions. So I know ice comes at a premium. Well, for us it does anyways in New York, because we don't really have an ice machine as part of like our fridge, like as you do in many suburban homes. But for this, it's worth it. Do not skip this step, because soaking the onions in the ice water, it gives it a crispness that you won't get any other way. So water is not enough. You actually want to make that water ice cold, and we're gonna add a tablespoon of salt to the water. And then we're gonna slice our onions super thin, and we're gonna soak them in that ice water. I'm using a tourné knife to peel my onion, trim the top. I know a lot of people like to peel their onions by just like cutting it in half and then ripping it off, but I want nice whole rings. And the only way to get nice whole rings is to peel the onion whole. So this curve of the knife just like really fits the curve of the onion, and you can just get in there with the blade, really hug it tight because it's a small blade, and then you're gonna pull. And since you're not rupturing any cells on the onion and you're just kind of peeling it, look, it's all up in my face, no tears. I'm just gonna cut a couple of slices on my mandolin. You can absolutely do this with a really sharp knife. You just wanna cut the onion as thinly as possible. If you are using a knife, for safety reasons, since it's like a ball, I would cut it in half and then cut slices. It's just gonna be a little safer. You don't want it too thick, because then it isn't gonna cook properly on top. And if you cut it too thin, you're gonna lose all that nice texture and it's all gonna kind of melt. So notice how they're all see-through, but at the same time, you can still pick it up and it's still a whole onion slice. This is a structurally sound ring of onion. I can twirl it on my finger. When you're using a mandolin, if you don't have the guard, you don't want to grip whatever you're slicing like that, because that's a good way to a torn finger. You got to push down with the flat hand, because that way if you come across, you kind of have a barrier. So you go flat, and even better, do it with a towel in between your hand and the onion, because then you can prevent slippage, and if your hand does slip, you have that towel as a barrier so you don't hurt yourself. So I'm whisking my salt into my ice water, and in go my onions. So yeah, so just dip your fingers in there, get a little onion cold plunge for your fingertips. What a treat. And we can just set that aside in the fridge to soak until our dough is fully proofed. Okay, so our onions have been soaked. I got my handy dandy salad spinner here. Look at that nice crispness they had. They were like, yes, they were staying together before, but they were a little floppy, a little flaccid. But now they got like that nice crisp. They look alive. By the way, sidebar, next time you make tacos and you need a nice oniony topping, do this. The texture is amazing, and it kind of rinses away all that harshness that raw onion has that some people don't like. No onion left behind. I really like these like lawnmower cranky things, because I don't have a lawnmower because I don't have a lawn. So you always see it on like Malcolm in the Middle and those old suburban sitcoms that they like really crank that lawnmower. This is the closest thing to cranking a lawnmower that I have ever done. All right, we're looking good. We're looking fluffy. Look how fluffy that looks. So water in a hot oven causes steam, and steam is the enemy of crispness and browning. So you really want to make sure your onions are super dry. So even though we salad spun these, I'm going to lay these out on a paper towel, pop another one on top, and then just pat it dry. See, you're still getting some moisture out of there. You don't want that. You don't want that moisture. Take out as much as you possibly can. All right, so onions soaked and dried. And now the big reveal. Look at that. Some poof. And now we layer. Gonna add our parm. I'm gonna add just a bit of oil right now on top. And now I'm gonna go with a heaping layer of onion and completely cover the pie. Because the little bits that hit the side of the pan get really caramelized and frizzly, so they get really sweet. We're gonna add some more cheese, a little drizzle of olive oil, and we're gonna go with another layer of onions. You can go in any order you want. I just like to end on Parmesan cheese because everybody loves those little brown bubbly bits like what you get on top of a lasagna. So here we have our beautiful dressed fugazzeta ready to go into the oven. Notice how there's a lightness to the onions on top. And that is all thanks to how thin we sliced it and that ice bath that it got. Right before I pop it in the oven, I'm going to go around the perimeter and hit it with a little bit more olive oil. That's to make sure that those edges get really crisp. Into the oven we go. So our fugazzeta is out of the oven. Just hear that, look at that. I wish you could smell this because you're just getting such a satisfying scent of onion and dough and cheese and parm. Ooh. Our dough is fully inflated, which means there's steam on the inside, which means our dough is fully cooked. We've got really nice caramelization around the edges. The dough at the bottom is crisp. I know because I put a spatula underneath and kind of just lifted it up. Look at how brown that is. That is amazing. The onions have collapsed, which means that they're fully cooked, and there's really nice color on the top. So there is nothing wrong with stopping here and digging into your fugazzeta right now. I like to pop this in the broiler just for a little bit more because I really like charred onions on top of everything. When something is this rich, a little hint of bitterness from some charred onion really helps lighten the whole thing up. But again, it's fully acceptable to eat it at this stage. This is just, to take it to another level. So we're gonna toss this in the broiler for a bit, and I'll see you in a second. So our fugazzeta is out of the oven and out of the broiler. So you see just a little bit of extra crispness and char on top. I feel like that adds a lot to the flavor. You definitely wanna let this rest, because if you cut into this right now, the center is a little bit too molten and you're gonna end up losing so much of it. So have a little patience, let it rest for a bit. You'll still get that epic cheese pull, but you'll have a much better time eating it. I'm actually going to scoop it off onto this rack to rest, and it comes out pretty easily. Let's take a look. Look at that. Look at the sides. Look at that crunch. I cannot wait to cut into this. I don't think I've ever been more excited to slice into anything before. And now we wait 10 long, long minutes. Has it been 10 minutes yet? No. Keep going. Ooh, something about like the smell of the pizza cooked in the cast iron with that olive oil and the cheese and the chili flakes and oregano. It takes me to Pizza Hut pan pizza in the best possible way. And as they say in Argentina, la fugazzeta está lista, boludo. Can I get in here? Can I bite? What can I say? It's the perfect food. It's the perfect food. It's got textures. You have crispy, chewy bread. You have molten, chewy, melty cheese. You've got slight crunch from the onion. Not too much, but a slight crunch, so it adds another layer of texture on top. And you've got a layer of really crisp charred onions. So as you bite through, you go crunch, lighter crunch, chew, really chewy. And then all of that is bathed in really well-seasoned olive oil that's laced with some oregano and some chili flake. It's amazing. I know making pizza at home seems like this big endeavor, and you're pretty much making a stuffed pizza. You can build this right in a cast iron pan, and you can just mush the dough with your hands until the form is right if you're not really good at stretching it. For the amount of effort as far as like homemade pizzas go, this is relatively low effort for huge payoff. I don't know what else to tell you. Make yourself happy and have another bite of fugazzeta.